to cloud. This will be posted on Honey's new YouTube channel, which I will pop a link into. So this is all about culture analytics. You can already see his video on CAPD website, CAPD conference, which was viewed by how many people, Honey? How many were in attendance? Oh, you're on mute. Yes.
So yeah, 6,000 people. Obviously, I had no idea 6,000 people are turning up in this massive hall. It was CRPD said, yeah, come along and talk to a few people. And I thought, yeah, that'll be a gathering of 20. It's like, wow, that was quite funny.
Excellent. So as you can see, one of the things about our wonderful speaker, he is very humble. So Hani is a world-renowned specialist in behavior analytics, culture analytics, but most importantly, he can break down, as Danny so nicely said, ephemeral subjects into not only pragmatic, but actionable steps. And given the state of world at large, I could not think of a better thing to focus on right now, how we can use the goodness of behavioral science and analytics to make organizations maybe a little bit more ethical and really more sustainable. So without further ado, Honey, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikita. And I thought we'll start today with those questions we just crafted, if we can, because I'll be fascinated to see what people will tell me. We have designed really two very, very simple questions. So if you can kindly just scan the QR code, hopefully, just answer those two. They're so simple. I think it will kind of bring me to a beautiful junction to start what I'm about to say.
And when you scan that lovely QR code, or you pop into the link I'm popping into the chat, and you can just click the little like in the bottom right-hand corner. So I know you're in. And there's 75 of you. Let's wait till we hit 20. 18, 19, 20. Great. I'm going to say it's a representative sample of the group. So let's crack on.
Well, so the first question we had, does your organization really make an effort to measure culture? I just wanted to know the real number behind that. So we can see here as it's rising. So it's scary, where no is leading the way. 7 are unsure. 10 says yes. Okay, look, wow. So that's a good thing. We'll just give it a bit longer to see where we are. So kind of neck and neck says yes and no. So clearly people are trying to make an effort, I would say. Okay, none are unsure. But that's a good, yeah, it's a good approach. Say, look, yeah, they are bothering about culture. So that's what it's telling me. So that's a good thing. The next question, which I'll gladly move on, is, and if they do, is behavioral science anywhere part of that measurement? Is it part of that journey? Now that I will be really fascinated in.
And we might get a standard distribution.
Yeah, I am shocked, not shocked. No, I'm not. Absolutely. No is a winner. 20, 21, 7 are unsure, 4 say yes. Oh my God. Okay, there you go. Now, this is fascinating, where clearly more and more people are bothered about culture, but yet, as the numbers can show you here, if we were to, I hope, just humbly agree, for those who read or did not read the book for that matter, that behavior is a key leading indicator in culture, right? Culture gets enacted, behaved. It cannot be articulated in better ways. So here is my first point of madness, if I may call it that we know that behaviors do matter, and the majority of the time that is not included in our measurement journey. So just think in basic common sense how crazy that sounds. We're saying the most significant thing. Imagine going to the doctor and you're unwell, and they don't bother measuring any of your vital signs like temperature, heart rate, and whatever. And in fact, the doctor will say, "What's your shoe size?" You probably walk out of there thinking, yeah, you're not a doctor really. But it's kind of similar, which is fascinating. So, but that really is my mission. If you want to know why I wrote the book, or why I even embarked on this difficult culture, I've just proved my point. I want to change, humbly with my colleagues, that narrative, hopefully with your help, that actually, when we say, is behavior science part of that journey, I want it to be 80% saying yes and not the other way around. So that really proves the point of why we're here. I'm going to share some slides and a case study with you, and hopefully then we can get some questions. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can everybody see my screen? A few thumbs up. Wonderful, I get it. Okay. So we're really, my motto has been for a long time now is, can we really make organizational culture the hero it deserves to be? And you may wonder, why am I saying those words? Well, I'll start by saying, why should you care? Why should you even bother? Get out of bed and come and talk to Zoom. We got some people in New York who got up really early or early-ish to listen to us. So why bother? And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I do want to talk about when it goes wrong, what happens? Well, there's far too many stories from the past and now, and sadly yet to happen, where we have brilliant brands that just seems to fall apart due to many issues. And sadly, as I've listed a few here, in a few stories, like the Boeing story, it leads to machinery and aircraft falling out of the sky. So we have toxic culture of concealment going on, ridiculous cost-cutting for no reason, running their business on a spreadsheet rather than really understanding what's happening. Or we can go back to the, I'm sure you all held the good old emissions gate or diesel gate, where basically it was okay in one of the best brands ever to practically lie about your emissions and ask engineers to get ever so clever with designing systems that cut those emissions when you put a car on a test rig. I'm sure you heard of that before. Or shall we visit the world's phagotoxic sales culture, where 8 rhymed with great? Now, why the hell does every customer needs to have 8 products? Well, it was purely because of that rhyme, and nothing else really. So the customer stops being important in our culture journey. Well, think about people that sadly had their organization wiped out, the Enrons. BP had issues, Facebook, Lehman Brothers. I can imagine here it's a conveyor belt. So culture clearly, and these are not in the distant past, some of them are happening now, still ongoing, if you are unsure. We can't just keep doing the same and expecting a different result. It is kind of madness. So really, that's my biggest motto of why you should care. Sadly, in all of this stories I've got here, culture is the villain, but we can't have that. And turning into the hero would be the topic that I want to address and how we do it. And hence, what really is the book is about. So let's start with the basic of all basics. What do we want out of our culture? If you sit up every day, just think common sense about it, you would want a culture that helps you manage the risk, keeps you out of trouble, a culture that stops you doing wrong things, not promote you to do the wrong things against your will. And we want to achieve great things, right? Really, that's what you want out of organizational culture, regardless. And what has gone wrong? Why are we battling with this? And in all my research, in far too many years now, 7 years quantitative, and then almost 88 years in doing what I'm doing, there are 3 cornerstones that seem to go wrong. The first one is, which I'm sure we've all had those, is how we define what we stand for, our culture values. So they become work of fiction, not based in reality. We hang them somewhere in our entrance and we think they're great. But the truth is, are we behaving those values? Are we walking the talk, is what I talk about. And what's interesting, when I ask many organizations, how did you come up with these? It's never bottom up, it's top down. So, and I say the best example I can give you, when they send a lot of executives away on an away day or week, hopefully into a spa, wrap them up with enough towels, and they may come up with what values we should have. Well, no one feels really attached to them in the rest of the organization. Odd. The next pitfall is that measuring culture becomes inappropriate. What I call it is really through the outcome only, through lagging indicators. It's all what we know to do because it's easy. You know, are the results up and down? Do we have incidents up and down? People happy? Are people leaving? All of those are lagging, but they are eminently easy to measure. And the best part of it is actually the only effort we ask their opinion is through what we call an engagement or happiness survey, which is nothing wrong with it, but yet again, it's a lagging indicator. Won't really give us insight into what is driving our culture, which is what I argue is in a minute that behavior is driving that. The last one, which is the oddest of them all, I hope, there's no linkage between culture and business outcome. It's like it's a taboo subject. I don't understand why that is. Well, isn't that what we want out of culture? It's rarely in the world of analytics, there's a linkage. And we need to change that narrative. So for me, there are some core issues and mistakes we do need to address here. And before we move ahead, I know we might have some wonderful psychologists in the room, but let us just set the scene a little bit for those who aren't, by understanding the difference between the two important words in the journey, the behaviors and the outcomes. Well, the behaviors are the foundations of our actions, right? So whether I speak up or not, whether I'm being fair to people or not, those are actions. Those actions, of course, have a consequence.
I
That is
brought
the
that over from Spain.
Sorry, is there
No, no,
somebody
all
saying?
good, muted.
Muted, apologies. Okay. So when you do something, you'd expect an outcome, right? So essentially, they could be positive or negative. But often, which is where the analytics journey could be a bit complex, but not too bad, there are external events and circumstances that can affect that, right? Essentially, that's when those behaviors surface. So if I can give you a quick example, you can say that culture of concealment or issues at Boeing have been going for many years, but only now we get to know about it. You know, 3 aircrafts, you know, fell out of the sky, goodness me. And the truth is that the event here starts bringing in the outcomes that you have seen because of the behaviors that have been as a leading indicator with us for a very long time. Clearly, outcomes are easy to measure because they could include financial gains, recognition, formed opinions, incidents. They are eminently easy. In fact, there is a little bit of a, I don't mind wanting to measure the outcome, but I'm worried about this obsession. If we ever keep measuring, we always add outcomes. We never look at leading, we just keep adding more and more. And it's like an obsession. And I'm saying, well, let's balance the conversation, really. So while outcomes are important indicators, relying solely on them will lead to shortcuts. So if you don't know how you got there, although the outcome might look great, if you don't know how you got there, you have a problem because you can't sort of challenge it, understand it, even repeat it. So it's quite important not to purely rely on the outcome measure. So what am I saying is, can we embrace this balance? Can we get this equilibrium going? Well, the driving force behind our actions are obviously, or the desired outcomes are behaviors. And in a holistic approach, really, we need to measure both. So focusing solely on outcomes will lead to shortcuts. In contrast, what I'm saying also is if we have the pure emphasis on behavior measurements, it may lead to lack of accountability. So you're telling me to behave in a certain way, but you're not telling me why. Why should I do what I do if you can't tell me what happens? But imagine what a nice story if you say, look, these are the behaviors we want. And if we do this, look at what outcomes we will get. People are intelligent. They'll go, okay, I understand it. So striking that balance is eminently important. And the big discussion today, which will hopefully come up through also my case study, is understanding leading and lagging indicators. And I'll be even already thinking about, well, how can I connect the two up, which is something I will address today as well.
Yeah.
So the critical findings that I can share with you. 3 quick pages here before we go into a case study. Stop focusing on the results and focus also on the behaviors that drive these. And it's kind of easy, but we just don't do it. People say, often you hear in rooms, I want to focus on performance. I want to perform on increasing profitability. We want to focus at less incidents. We want to focus at customer happiness. What I keep saying, what you want to focus on is the actions and the behaviors that drive those things. Because they don't just happen by magic. It's people that make these things happen. The second one, which I find quite scary, is the idea of I can borrow someone else's culture. It's like, or a framework. You know, I love frameworks. Yeah, let's bring a framework here from another company who we think we compete with. It will just work. We'll just do what they do. And culture, I hope we can at least agree, is so unique to your environment, to your processes, to your policies. You can't just borrow it. So off-the-shelf stuff, you know, I would have some real problems with. I'm yet to find that the behaviors that drive events in one organization, in the one industry, are the same like another. I haven't found it yet in that many years. Maybe I will one day. And here's the third one, which is really important as a learning. And often I hear this. They talk about, well, the people accountable for culture are leaders, and it's only the leaders. Sorry, it's not. It's everybody. Everybody in an organization is accountable. Every single person. Leaders are merely the custodians. But what does that mean for leaders when they are custodians? Leaders, this whole idea of saying I do alone is not good enough anymore. Yes, I'm glad that you champion behaviors and you do. Every day you walk into work, your number one job is to create a culture, an environment that others can champion their wanted behaviors in. So you can't simply say, well, I do. You have to create that environment. I mean, if you can't do that as a leader, then what on earth are you there for? You can't have nowadays the answers to all the questions. You can't do everyone's job. You got to rely on people. If you create that environment as a leader for people to champion organizational culture, you got a problem. So what do we want out of culture analytics, me having told you all this? Well, really, I want to understand the high insight stuff. It needs to tell me why things happen. If you can't explain truly why things happen, got a problem, really. But if you can, great. We can now maybe talk about where. Is it the people's behavior or the environment, the place? Got to articulate that well. The insight stuff will tell me if we were to change the environment or build capability for behavior of the people in place, what will I get back for it? You know, what are we likely to gain here? And the foresight bit. So before horrid things happen, can you just explain where in the organization, having known the high insight and the inside, where in the organization are we more susceptible? Is it the people or is it the place? Because often we know environments is where toxicity happens. It's not people. I'll go back to my story. I often say, you know, after the Wells Fargo issue, I think they fired 5,000 people instantly. So, excuse me, you told me then, are you telling us that you've managed to hire 5,000 criminals to come to work every day? I bet you if you want to do that, that'll be a hard thing to achieve. Understand the environment that drove those behaviors. And in foresight, that can give you an early detection system to stop the outcomes before they even happen. Really important. And if you want to deliver change, meaningful change, it really does boil down to, is it a people or a place issue? If it's a people issue, it's a capability issue. Now, people, you know, might be hindered by knowledge or skill or ability to do something, to speak up or to be fair or to be standardized. These are all behaviors. And if it's a place issue, then you got to think about how do I bring about an opportunity for them to enact the wanted behaviors, and how do I motivate them? Quite simply, those are your best ally in any change or intervention I've done in the many years I have been doing this. And trust me, it works. And I don't want to complicate it. Those are the things that can really help you change. So in our example, let's talk a little bit about how do we drive meaningful analytics. And the stages that I won't labor on about here, but hopefully to common sense, is you got to define and understand the problem. What are we trying to do? How are we going to measure leading and lagging indicators, not just lagging? I'll keep on and on about that. What insights are we going to get out of it? How do we drive, and I love this term, culture by design. So you may wonder why I call it culture by design. How can we design an environment that really drives the behaviors we want to have because they drive great outcomes? And you design everything else, I bet you, I'm sure at work, your financial systems are designed, your furniture, your office colors, everything in designs. How many people do they really design the optimal environment for their culture? Really do culture by design? Giveaway? I'm yet to find it. Very few. And finally, you got to continuously validate. You can't measure culture once a year and fall asleep for the rest. It's continuous. You've got to evolve it. You've got to track it all the time because it can change. Behaviors can change and so on. Ultimately, what we want to do is, and back to how we connect to provide predictive. To understand the why, we got to measure the people, how I behave at work, and the place. So what are the behaviors the place drives? If that gives me the why, by connection, it will start giving me the how, and then I've got anything else I want to add in terms of KPIs and HR demographics to understand the critical impact of where and the what. You know, the what has happened is not very clever. You know, you know it. Things great happen, things bad happen. You often know that. But imagine that you're only living on the right-hand side. You know the where and the what, but you have no idea how, and you have no idea why. How on earth are we going to design an intervention? That's what happens today, by the way. I'm not telling you something shocking. It does happen. We're going to change that narrative. Essentially, if you have one set of leading indicators, which is a case study in a moment I'll share with you, now you can have a plethora of culture metrics. So I often, and I'm sure you heard this, I'll show this a story. People come and say, yeah, but we're only interested in risk culture. We're only interested in safety culture. We only interested in sustainability culture. Well, guess what? They're all culture. It's just the prism of the outcome you're looking from is why you're saying what you're saying. And it is going to be behaviors that drive it. But it's the same human beings, the same people at work that drive all of those things: risk culture, safety culture, sustainability. They drive everything. So when you measure leading indicators properly, now you have an incredible amount of trajectory of what you can truly measure, which is what will come out in our hopefully use case shortly. So let's crack on with the use case to bring it to life. Here's an organization that has been growing, and essentially they've come to a bit of a difficult time of how do we continue on growing further. You know, we're a tech innovator. How do we keep growing? We're having issues. Their issues that they have found out are around the following left-hand side topics: around accountability, performance, coaching. You know, people are well coached around here. Psychological safety, people can speak up. Effective agility, there you go, that's a lovely word, isn't it? What does effectively agility means? But for them, it meant I can really do my work effectively. And the culture of recognition. If those are the outcomes, I hope logically you'd agree with me, you should have metrics that measures those. And they do have many metrics that measures those, which I could talk forever, but obviously we'll be here for a long time, so it's outside the realms of that. But for each one of those, we have to create a predictor before we connect it all up, which is stage 2. And stage 3 is creating that path analysis that tells me, is there an optimal path? Which of the, do I focus on accountability first? Or do I get my performance right first? Or do I get my recognition first? Which of those come first, and so on? So that's, for people who love the maths, using structural equation modeling, that's known as path analysis, or root cause analysis, comes in many words. As an example, I'm showing you here at number 2, a predictor for one of the outcomes. I know this is all done in regression analysis, and regression can be very hard to read, but when you put it in odds ratio, like I've done here, it becomes easier. So what am I saying here? For the behaviors of team focus, achievement, I am as good as what I do every day, sequential, I accurately do things every day in a sequential form, and I'm innovative. You know, I can bring pioneering ideas to my work. Where those 4 behaviors are present, people are almost 10 times more likely to be effective at the work they do. The consequence of absence of those behaviors means that people are 9 times less likely to be effective at the work they do. So look at that variance from 9 times less likely where those behaviors are absent to almost 10 times more likely when those behaviors are absent. That's an ROI that is easy to understand without looking at all the regression parameters, which could cause confusion in the room. I hope you'd agree. So how about connecting all these themes up? Are they connected? Let's have a look. Well, the good news, most of them are. In fact, the journey for their culture, uniquely for this company, please don't take this and adopt this everywhere. That's unique to this example. They have to start by getting their work-life balance right. If they do that, now they enable people to work effectively. Working effectively means that people can be accountable. Accountability means people have psychological safety. Wow. And now we can get recognition. And interestingly enough, people are also now being well coached to do good work. So this is interesting. And you can see for them that behaviors are the starting point here. There are critically 5 behaviors. If you don't have those, you've got a problem. You can see they got 3 of them, 2 are absent. And as you go along the path, you may have to add 1 or 2 behaviors. Tick means it was for them present mostly, and across means obviously it's mostly absent. But here we go. Just pause at this for a minute and think. People normally may start by saying, we need to coach people well to be effective. Imagine that could be assumed to be the starting point. And how shocking for this organization, who did assume that actually is the final outcome you gain once you have gone through the entire culture journey. And you've got to start with work-life balance and not coaching people. Well, that's what they were exactly investing them. They were starting here. The shock and horror for them to see that mathematically. Well, what about performance? Apologies, actually, before I go to performance, you want to talk about ROI, a return on investment. So if they focus on 4 behaviors, what do they get? Well, they get a plethora of outcomes. That means that people have a good work-life balance, that colleagues can speak up where an action is taken. That means people are being recognized for the work they do. And look at these multiples of the occurrence if you get those 4 behaviors present. 20 times, 37 times, not just incredible ROI. That 1 page alone should actually stop the board thinking about, oh my God, we got like 10 outcomes, we're going to focus on 20 outcomes, 30 outcomes. But actually, it changes the narrative. Say, think leading indicators. Focus on 4 behaviors, you're going to get all those outcomes you want. And it helps change the narrative. And 1 outcome was missing. And before I hand the mic back to you guys for questions, what about performance? You did not see it in my path. You may wonder why. Well, here's the shock for you. Performance metric did not feature in the culture journey, and you would ask why. Unfortunately, there are 4 behaviors that are a predictor of me gaining a good performance in this company. In fact, if I am self-focused, empowering, radical, consolidative, and focus on achievement, I am 14 times more likely to gain good performance. The unfortunate thing that 2 of those behaviors, self-focus works against team focus. And if you remember in my path, I said team is what we're after to get outcomes. Consolidate is against innovate. So basically, you're giving me good performance if I am self-focused and consolidate rather than innovate. So their own performance system is actually rewarding the 2 of the wrong behaviors that does not drive the organizational outcome, which means that performance did not even exist in their culture journey. Shock and horror when you put it like that, in that disconnect between culture and performance. So I want to open it to questions, but I'll leave you with I love this quotation from the former CEO of IBM, where he did say culture is not just one aspect of the game, but it is the game. It is the end of an organization. It's nothing more than the collective capacity of its people to create value. And how true is that? Just the realization of this. If I get every leader on the planet to realize what this means and what they do about it, wow, we will create a coup, a movement. But anyhow, let me stop here the going through all that, and excuse my own AI coming to that, and hopefully allow for questions to pop. I hope you found that interesting, but feel free, don't hold back to ask anything.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hani. So feel free to either ask questions, just unmute yourself and jump in, pop them in the chat, pop them on Menti. We're giving you 3 options here, people. So hopefully something in line with your personality. So perfect. Any questions?
Yeah, Nikita, I've got a question. Jan here.
Go for it.
How long does your speaker, I forget Nahil, first name come?
Hani, it's Hani.
Hani, yes, Hani. How long do you think it takes to really change the culture in a team or in a small organization? What do you think? How long does it take?
So even in very large organizations, 3 months, 6 months can really yield incredible change. I mean, I would argue, if you want the best change story ever, again, I'll refer you back to an interesting one being Boeing, where they have fundamentally changed the culture of the organization with a reverse takeover of McDonnell Douglas, so profoundly, so powerfully. Now, I know it went the wrong way, but just shows you the power. When you're determined, you can make change. The problem is you better know what you're changing to, is my argument. So the power of behavior change, don't undermine it. 3 months can be a long time, and I'm seeing incredible results after just 3 months.
Thank you very much.
I have a question that I've just popped into the chat earlier, which is about industries, different types of industries. And one of the projects I've been working on over the past couple of years is in the mining industry, on a safety culture. And it's a global company, but they have the sort of the central strategy and then the local approach, which is great. But the pushback that we get on a lot of this, we can see where the issues are. When you track behaviors, you can see exactly what the issues are. But it's a very traditional industry. It has its own, each mine has its own culture. But trying to convince the CEOs locally that this is an approach they should take when they're looking at safety behaviors and how leadership in particular impacts that is very difficult. And we get things such as, these are quite simple people. They don't understand psychology. We've always done it this way. They trust safety consultants who give very concrete ways of doing things. They will put the rewards in place. They will have all of everything, lots of complication and information and noise going on. But the problems still exist because they won't look at it in this way. What sort of experience do you have of trying to overcome that sort of apathy about behavior?
Yeah. That's a brilliant topic. I have had this twice in my journey. Funny enough, I have worked with a mining company who exactly said those things to me. And it's fascinating once you they're just opening a little bit to myth bust how much they're willing to change. And I've had it just a few months ago in a food manufacturing company where exactly said, in fact, went as far as saying, as much as I'm going to work with you, Hani, he said, look, I think that for every single worker we have on the factory floor, I bet you this will mean nothing. You'll be able to achieve nothing, find nothing. And we did myth that bust. So what is the truth here? The reality here, you've got to make it simple, and you've got to do that connection. If you're going to come and say to them, here are 40 or 20 or 30 things, or even 10 things you got to work on, and it's outcome led in its language, sadly, the kind of industry you're in will want to resist that, resist change. That go back to what they know, you know, keep at it. Don't change anything. The narrative that I found helps is say, now let me just show you those 10 different 20 things that you want. Do you want them? Do you want all those outcomes? You know, you want less incidents, you want blah, blah, blah. Great, you do. Okay. Now, if I tell you, just focus on, we're going to focus on 2 behaviors and behavior change. And if we do that, we are 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 times more likely to get those outcomes. Would you be happy with that? Get them on board and make it really simple and say, right, for those 2 behaviors we want to focus on, we've done our studying, we know it's either the people or the place or both. So now we can help you by really designing some specific things that we need to do every day that would nudge and drive those behaviors the right way. And then we'll come back and show you how if we've done that, what have you gained? So what are the outcome improvements you're getting? So get them to buy into that, but just keep the story simple. And in that language, the minute I say that, I find people start buying into it. I'm not saying 100% people buy into it, but it's just the simplification and really giving them specific interventions, working on the 2 behaviors. Don't scare them with those 30, 40 outcomes. By the way, you know, we ordered, you know, you get that wrong, you know, it's too many. I say, you want those? Let's forget about them. Just focus on those 2 things. Let me tell you how. It's just a language, and people start buying into that. I've had this, and you can change the narrative even there. Try it out.
Thank you ever so much. That's useful.
I wonder if you have time for a short story about safety. Paul O'Neill at Alcoa was so adamant about safety as the key to profitability and performance because he said, unless you're operating a totally safe environment, you don't feel like you can perform. You're always under threat of an accident. In fact, he went to all the plants and said to his people, look, this is really serious. And how serious it is, if you see any unreported safety violation, I want to know about it. Here's my home phone number. He took some calls, fired some people. People realized he was very serious about it. Alcoa was very profitable, and he realized the outcome he was looking for was not driven by efficiency, it was driven by a culture of safety to begin with.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Thank you, George. And Lowry, I have your hand up. Can you give us some insight from the aviation industry by chance?
I can in a minute. There's something I was thinking about during the chat, but hello, Hani, and hello, everybody. I was just wondering, Hani, when you were talking about behaviors, are there any, I could say, meta behaviors that you think have the biggest return on interest, just if there were a few of them practiced that could be used across industries and companies?
Yeah. So I don't want to stereotype it and say, here's one thing you could do and it will solve all your problems today, because I'll be a liar to do that. But there are, or even one specific behavior just keeps coming up in many themes over and over again, but singularly you can't just do it, which is around team focus. We have environments and reward systems that actually focus on individual behavior, you know, me behaviors rather than team behavior. So I find that rather odd, because most organizations, wherever you go, they seem to talk a good talk, isn't it? Good game. Yeah, we're about the team, you know, everyone working together, you know, we're about, but actually the reward systems, recognition systems, whatever performance systems you'd like to think about, actually award individualistic approach to behavior. So that's the biggest one, I would say. It just keeps coming up. And I just think, you know, we just need to rethink that, because we're in a complex world where I'm afraid team effort is the way forward. For many, I don't want to make the same case for teams. I've done a lot of research around team dynamics in my life as well. But it's so obvious in any industry, 9 times out of 10, you've really got to think team is your best protection against issues, complex problems, well-being. And yet we completely have performance systems working against those, even to date, which I found odd or fascinating. I guess it says let's keep doing the same as we do and never change.
Absolutely, and there's a nice parallel about teams, and I can see TeamScope behind you. And
There you go.
Larry, you might appreciate it. So, can you tell us a little bit more about TeamScope and how you flush it out in a safe environment?
Yeah, so maybe I'm a bit unorthodox in many of my ways. I apologize for that from now. And here's another one for you, where to drive team dynamics, leadership, or beyond, I bring people to an environment where you have to play team, and that is flying an airliner. And we literally take them to real life simulators. And typically there's 5 to a team, from people performing ATC to flying the plane, navigating. And these things are in real time, you know, moving, wobbling. You can imagine it's quite realistic. But it's interesting when we're just 2 hours talking about how you can fly an airline in simple ways. They can go, if they play as a team, they can rock up on the flight deck with no flying experience and fly a complex airliner from pushback to landing. If they can't work as a team, though, you will see the disastrous effects right there and then. And it's incredible. I've just done it with EDF, and obviously you can imagine they're on nuclear sites, and they went for an hour-and-a-half classroom to doing this. And I started bringing in some events, extra events and issues, and see how they manage risk. And you have, you know, fluid intelligence in the team. You know, oh, I've seen this before, we know what to do. Powerful stuff, but they never forget it. And they really take the core team behaviors back into the working environment. In fact, we're going to regroup again in about a week to talk about how they're going to keep the learning going in that environment. So just a novel way. The problem is with classroom-based team development skills, I find could be a little bit, you know, oh, well, we're asked to build some Lego or a structure, or, yeah, it's great, but, you know, it's not meaningful enough. When I say go and fly an airliner, people say, okay, that is meaningful work. And we're going to ace it as a team. So fascinating way of doing it. That's TeamScope. Look it up. It is a bit unusual, but fascinating. I was an airline pilot before I became a behavior scientist, which is a little bit unusual as well, I guess.
Perfect. And Larry, what are your thoughts before we go to Caitlin's question?
Well, I fully agree. I've been working as cabin crew, so I might have been on the other side of the flight deck door to you once upon a time, Hanny. But yes, I've been put inside simulators where we do CRM. CRM is crew resource management, a human factors technique. And they basically put you through a simulation. You do not know what's going to happen. And the learning is in the debrief, by seeing what you did, what your teammates did, understanding what maybe drove that behavior. And then the outcome from that is learning how to better work as a member of the team, how to support each other.
And
But
as you know, the aviation industry has gone further from CRM to call it MCC, multi-crew cooperation. And now they added the word enhanced MCC courses, where they know it's really important to focus on behaviors. It's fascinating.
The longer the acronym,
realize it's not an SOP, it's not an operating procedure book. It's how people behave. It does matter.
absolutely, and it also matters for us to pay attention to somebody who's been holding their hand for the last 5 minutes. Kathleen, am I pronounced the name correctly?
Caitlin. Thanks,
Caitlin.
Nikita. Henny, I just have a question about how you do this at scale. Personally, I've worked with coding behavior. It's very difficult, especially when you include multiple raters. So I'm just wondering if you could paint a picture of how do you actually achieve behavioral measurement at scale?
Yeah. So that is the other unusual thing we managed to hopefully bring psychometrics for behavior measurement on huge scale, ground up. But it's about how you design it. I talk about it in the book, about what does sort of the diagnostics look like for validity. Obviously, I've been working with CultureScope, which is our tool, that really in just 12 minutes using advanced techniques like ipsative, item response theory under the hood, and in an adaptive computerized testing way, we could make it really effective, quick way, about 12 minutes. But we have to, we measure how people behave and what they observe. And the minute you do that in multi-languages as well, and can be done on any device, it's device neutral, you can really go at scale. So I have dealt with this issue, but you gotta drive it more quantitative than qualitative. The minute you think you can't drive it on scales because I gotta go and visit every site, you can't. I mean, what manager in a 300, 400,000, you can't go at scale if it's not digital, if it's not quantitative. You've got to be able to do that, and connecting it with analytics gives you the stories.
So just to check my understanding, is it then self-report of your own behavior? Is that?
Well, yes, absolutely, it is that. But remember the techniques of psychometrics. So when you go the ipsative, the forced choice, the IRT, and adaptive test, you're now really drilling into what really happens, not what good looks like. So I am guarded being a secret psychometrician here for far too many years. There's so much invalidity out there, but you've really got a diagnostic validity has to come first before I even address analytics validity. And in that is what I mean, self-reporting, yes, but it's got to be about what I do. I'm not asking you how you feel today. It's about what you do and how I can fish that out. And psychometrics can be a big ally. So this is essentially what I'm talking about in my analytics journey. Psychometrics like never before on steroids, deployed globally and massively. And why not?
Absolutely.
Just one last question before I hand over the mic.
Yeah.
So you've done your path analysis. What is the rate of change? What am I trying to ask here? I guess you've showed that you get these leading behaviors from your path analysis. How quickly does that change? And how often should you be running this analysis?
Yeah. So I've had in one massive organization, 71 countries, 300,000 employees, under the cosh with regulators, under real pressure, 3 behaviors we knew are big allies to a variant presence and absence for each region that they're in, with design-specific interventions. And within 9 months, they had incredible change across all the places, across all sides. They were measuring quarterly, at least pulsing quarterly, in core areas when we knew where there were issues. So it is possible to make mega change in a few months. I've seen for another organization I work with in 6 months, they had incredible improvement in the outcomes that they were after with just driving behaviors. So once you articulate, the problem is we don't know the how and why. The minute we do that, remember, we're now focusing on maybe sometimes just 3 or 4 behaviors to drive the magnitude multiple of outcomes. And you've got to continuously measure, like every maybe 6 months, I would say, typically. It depends how large it is. You just need to track. You don't have to redeploy everywhere. You know where your hotspots are. Do a t-test. Some people you can even apply interventions to, some not. Validate it so that I remove, people I know will attack me often on correlation, causation, all that. So, well, test it, t-test it. No problem with that. If you think we're talking rubbish, test it out, see what it is. There are all sorts of ways. You gotta experiment. Behaviors aren't an expensive program. People think, oh, change. Oh, I gotta throw millions at this. Actually, behaviors are the cheapest thing we could do. Funny enough, but no one does it. They go for all the expensive stuff. Let's buy a gym membership for everybody. Yeah, right. I'm so stressed at work, I don't even have to go to the gym. But hey, I've got a really expensive gym membership. They start doing weird stuff, which I think, okay, that's not going to help. It's about culture change means behavior change. And it's the cheapest and yet the least addressed.
That's what makes it really fascinating, that it doesn't need to be expensive. And what also doesn't need to be expensive is Mentimeter. And on that note, we have some questions. So pick a couple, honey.
How can we measure the culture drivers? What are possible data sources and the collections of these? Well, the culture drivers, one of the biggest, most obvious one is the environment. And in the analytics journey, you can start bringing those in. So, for instance, the culture drivers might be a time issue. When I bring a time metric, and I can show that actually, if people don't have enough time to do something, that drives, maybe shortcuts. So maybe I go from conformity to non-conformity, or I go from standardized to flexible, anything goes, while we are in a nuclear industry or energy or whatever, we want to see the opposites of those. So bring in, when you study data sources, you want to look at leading, lagging events. And those events are also a metric. Bring it into the journey. Start asking the why and the how. The issue is we often ask about the what only, or we're satisfied with it. So that's how you can bring that in. And it is important to bring that in, because we know behavior is not like personality. Personality, the older we get, become quite fixed. But your behaviors are changeable. If I take you from one environment to another, just within the same organization, you will probably say, oh, I'm sort of have my radar up, I see what behavior is acceptable. And you either start behaving the same way, you change. So always bring that data in. That's why I talk a lot in the book about the place. I'm not only looking about just the data around the people, which answers that question. Let's look at what recommendations do you have to influence the buy-in or change the organization not operating? Absolutely. The biggest buy-in is quite simple. I showed one page today where I said to you, if we focus on 4 behaviors, we're going to get 20, 30, 40 outcomes, and that's the magnitude of increase we're likely to get. Now, you want those outcomes. I'm going to ask you to stop worrying about them. I know you're worried about them, and every leader goes, oh my God, got 40 things I got to think about. No, don't worry about those. Here are 4 behaviors that will get you there. Now the big focus becomes a lot easier. Is it the place? Is it the people? What we're going to do? That's when I get buy-in. If I can't have one page that I explain to people, remember I said, tell them what they need to do, why they need to do it and what they get for it. That is the one buy-in page, whichever way you like to put it. And then people will start really getting, I get it, why we need to drive expressiveness or standardize or whatever. Shall I pick another one, or are we out of time?
Just one more question, and then we'll start the wrap up.
Okay, how do we track the behaviors are being exhibited? What does a unit of Innovate looks like? Yeah, you can't just track the behaviors. Whenever I say repeat measurement, you got to track the behavior and the outcome. You got to have a metric for both. So if the behavior we do it by deploying Culture Scope tool, but whatever tool you're using, if you are deploying that, you've got to understand the shift in behavior and the magnitude of the outcome is driven. If you don't measure both, then the change of behavior won't mean anything. So I'll say, whatever tools you got to keep measuring the leading and keep measuring the lagging and connect those together.
Absolutely. And get any data, qualitative or quantitative, that you can. So we
absolutely, you can bring quantity. I mean, I in the book talk about bringing qualitative data. You can say what behaviors drive people to loving oranges or pears or whatever. You can do that. You can still build a metric for that. Absolutely.
Excellent. I'm talking about building stuff. This is just the first hour event, so this is not something we can kind of go too much into depth with. But what's really kind of key, we covered quite a range of topics, and I'm just curious if there would to be another event on culture and analytics and behavioral science with wonderful Hani, potentially. I don't want to be presumptuous, if you'd want to participate in another one. But what sort of topics would you like us to cover more in depth from anything we discussed or has not been discussed today? If you can type it in or unmute yourself, jump in.
I was going to say, please type it. I'd love to look on anything that you're grappling with. Maybe I can bring some case studies.
Behavioral systems mapping.
Okay, I love to talk about mapping. Yeah, brilliant. So needless to say, I'm sorry, I'm being like a broken record. I do cover a lot of mapping in the book and culture types. So yeah, I can bring that.
Perfect. And Hani, is there a cheeky discount that people can use if they decide to go with your book? If you can pop it.
There is. I think at the moment with Black Friday, there is even one that gives you 30% that I've had it on LinkedIn. But if you want, I could look up for that now for the 30%. So let me actually, in case they changed it, Coogan page. Okay, so the discount code is sale 30, all one word, all capital letters. I think there's a 30% discount going on that Coogan page. Sale, SALE 30. But you better hurry because it ends, I believe, tonight, midnight GMT time, if you haven't got the book already. If you have, I'd also love to hear from you, even if you're for or against or whatever. And if you want to leave me obviously reviews, particularly in Amazon, I'll be ever so grateful. I really want to start this movement. I want to give the world something back. So please help me if you can, because enough is enough. I don't want to hear. I'm sick of hearing culture being the villain. Let us really change the narrative. It's enough.
Excellent. So hopefully this is steps in the right direction. So, and thank you so much
100%.
everyone for taking the steps in the right direction with us. Thank you, Honey. What I'm gonna do now, we can still stay and chat. I'm just gonna stop the recording. Let me just stop the recording. Done.